Strange Encounter. Chapter 1. The Charm. People think I'm a brave man, someone who is never afraid. But they're wrong. I wasn't always brave, and sometimes I was very scared. Today, I'm an important man with a good job and people like me. They don't know that I used to be afraid of everything. Let me tell you how that changed. When I was young, I was very shy. I was scared to talk to other people, especially women. I thought they would laugh at me. I was lonely and unhappy. Then there was a war. I had to become a soldier, even though I was terrified. I thought the other soldiers would laugh at me because I was so scared. But I was wrong. They were afraid too, but we didn't talk about it. One day I was walking through town feeling lonely. I saw an old man standing by the road. He didn't cross, even though there weren't many cars. When I got closer, I realized he was blind. He wanted to cross the road but couldn't without help. Everyone else was rushing by, not noticing him, but I had time, so I decided to help him. I took his arm and helped him across the road. He thanked me and felt my coat. "You're a soldier," he said. Then he took something from his pocket and gave it to me. "Take this charm," he said. "It will protect you. Wear it and you'll be safe." Then he walked away. The next day I went to war. I was scared, but I remembered the charm in my coat. It made me feel a little braver. I wasn't sure if the charm really worked, but it made me feel safe. We were in the middle of a battle, and soldiers were dying all around me. But I wasn't afraid. I thought, I'll be okay because I have the charm. Our leader got hurt, and the other soldiers were scared. I wasn't. I went to help him, thinking the charm would keep me safe. I brought him back, and he told me to lead the men. So I did. We fought well that day, and I wasn't afraid. After that, I wasn't scared anymore. I became a leader, and the soldiers trusted me. But I knew my bravery wasn't real. It was because of the charm. One day we had to take a bridge that was guarded by many soldiers. It was a dangerous mission, and my men were scared. I was ready to go, but it wasn't there when I reached for the charm. I panicked at first, but then I saw my men. They were looking to me for courage. I realized they weren't scared anymore because of what I had said. They trusted me. That's when I knew I had to be brave for them. So I shouted, "Let's go!" And we ran to the bridge. We won that day, and I learned something important. Brave men are afraid, but they don't let fear stop them. That day, I became a brave man for real. And I never needed the charm again. Chapter 2. Journey's End. Tom Smith was a nice young man who wanted a job, but couldn't find one. He didn't have money for new clothes or going to the cinema. When he was younger, he wanted to be a footballer, but now he had a new idea. He thought maybe he could find a job in a sports shop. Tom looked for jobs every day, but nothing came up. One day, he saw an ad for a fair in the park and decided to go. He enjoyed the fair, won a box of fruit and a book, and treated himself to an ice cream. While walking around, he saw a sign for a fortune teller, Madame Zelda, who could tell people's future. Curious, Tom went in. Madame Zelda told him something important. "Don't go anywhere next Friday. If you travel, you won't arrive." Tom wasn't worried at first. He didn't have anywhere to go. But on Thursday, he got a letter inviting him for a job interview at a sports shop in a town 30 kilometers away. The interview was on Friday. Tom remembered Madame Zelda's warning and felt uneasy, but he couldn't miss this chance. So on Friday, he got on the train. An old man sat next to him, and they talked for a while. Suddenly, the train stopped because a tree had fallen on the tracks. They couldn't continue. Tom realized Madame Zelda had been right. He didn't make it to his interview. Feeling disappointed, he helped the old man get off the train and walked with him to a nearby village. The old man noticed Tom's sadness and asked him what was wrong. When Tom explained about the job interview, the old man smiled and said, "I own many sports shops, and I'm looking for someone to run my biggest one. Would you like the job?" Tom was overjoyed. What had started as a terrible day turned into the best day of his life. Chapter 3. The Other Man. I was a writer. I used to write books, and I still do. But now no one knows. No one can see me anymore. Something strange has happened to me, and I want to tell you about it. In January, I decided to write a long book. To focus, I left my home and rented a small room. This is a good place for writing, I thought. I'll write my book here. The room was small, but I liked it because it was quiet. I began working on my book and was happy, but then strange things started happening. One day I was at my desk with my pen in hand. Suddenly I thought, I want a coffee, but I don't have any. So I put my pen down and went to the shop. When I came back, my pen was gone. I searched the table, the floor, and my chair, but it wasn't anywhere. This doesn't make sense, I thought. That night something else strange happened. I was in bed and the room was very quiet. Suddenly I woke up. What was that? I wondered. Then I heard a man's voice. Who's there? I shouted. But there was no answer and no one was in the room. I was scared and confused. What can I do? I thought. After that, strange things happened every day. But I needed to finish my book, so I stayed. The room was small with just a bed, a table, a chair, and an old mirror on the wall, which I liked. One day I looked in the mirror and I saw him, the other man. It wasn't me. This man had a beard, but I didn't. I shut my eyes and looked again, and this time I saw my own face. That didn't really happen, I thought. I was wrong. There wasn't another man. That day I went for a walk and didn't work on my book. I didn't want to stay in the room and deal with strange things. Later I returned, but the room was too quiet. I looked in the mirror and saw my face, but I wasn't happy. I went to bed but couldn't sleep. Tomorrow I'll leave, I thought. After that, I fell asleep. But then something strange happened again. The other man stood by my bed and spoke to me. You will never leave here, he said. You will stay with me. I woke up feeling very cold and scared. I knew I had to leave right away. I quickly packed my things. I was terrified, but I wasn't sure why. I just knew I had to go. When I finished packing, I thought, I'll leave now. I looked around the room and glanced at the mirror. Suddenly, I felt even more afraid. I couldn't see the other man in the mirror. And worse, I couldn't see my own face either. Why not? I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I had no voice. Then I saw him, the other man. He wasn't in the mirror anymore. He was sitting at the table, holding my pen and writing my book. I felt angry and tried to speak, but I still couldn't because I had no voice. The other man just smiled and kept writing. Suddenly, I heard a knock on the door and my friend's voice calling, Are you there? I want to see you. I felt a little better then, thinking my friend would help me, but I couldn't move. The other man walked to the door, opened it, and invited my friend in. Come in and see my room. I'm writing my book, he said. My friend entered but didn't see me. He smiled at the other man and said, Oh, you've grown a beard now. Again, I tried to speak, but nothing happened. My friend didn't see or hear me. He only saw the other man. That's my story. The other man took my room, my face, and my voice. He will finish my book too, but he doesn't know one thing. I can still write, and I'm telling you my story right now. Chapter 4. Lost Love. Nearly 10 years ago, I was living in a city. The summers there were scorching, and I longed for a change of scenery. I wanted to escape to the countryside, walk through the woods, and enjoy the sight of green trees. I owned a small red car and had a map with me, so one night I decided to drive out of the city. As I drove through the night, I felt a sense of contentment. That summer was especially good, and the countryside was stunning in the early morning light. The sun was warm, the sky was a brilliant blue, and I could hear birds chirping in the trees. Suddenly something felt off. What's wrong? I thought. Then I realized, oh no, I'm out of petrol. Now I'd have to walk to find a town and buy fuel. But where was I? I looked at the map and quickly realized I wasn't near any town. I was lost in the countryside. And then I saw her. A girl was walking down the road holding a bunch of flowers. She was wearing a long dress, and her black hair, which gleamed in the sunlight, was long as well. She was beautiful. I wanted to ask for help, so I got out of the car and greeted her. Hello, I said, I'm lost. Can you tell me where I am? She looked nervous, so I softened my voice. I've run out of petrol, I explained. Do you know where I can get some? She gazed at me with her blue eyes and smiled. I thought to myself, what a lovely girl. Then she spoke. I don't know, but come with me to the village. Maybe we can help you. I happily followed her, and we walked for quite a while. Strange, I thought. There's no village marked on my map. Maybe it's a very small one. Eventually, we reached a quaint old village. The houses were tiny, black and white, and the village was full of animals. She led me to a house and smiled warmly. "Please, come in," she said. Inside, the house was clean but also felt unusual. A fire burned in the hearth, with food cooking above it. I was starting to feel hungry. That's odd, I thought. They cook their food over a wood fire. Maybe they can't afford modern appliances. I met her parents, and they seemed like kind people, though their clothes were quite peculiar. "Sit down," the old man invited. "Are you thirsty after your walk?" He handed me a drink. "Thank you," I said. But I noticed the drink was unlike anything I'd ever tasted, dark brown and very strong. Even though it was unfamiliar, I felt happy there. I asked about petrol, but the old man seemed confused. "Petrol?" he asked. "What's that?" I found it strange, but then asked, "Do you walk everywhere?" He smiled and said, "Oh no, we use horses." Horses, I thought. That's unusual. Why not use cars? But I didn't say anything. I felt so content in their company. I stayed with them the whole day, and they invited me to dinner that evening. Afterward, the girl and I went out to the garden. The girl's name was Mary. "This is nice," she said. "We like having visitors. We don't see many people here." We talked happily, and she was very beautiful. But after a while, her voice grew quiet and she looked sad. "Why are you sad?" I asked her. "I can't tell you," she said. "You're just a visitor here. We have to say goodbye tonight. You have to leave now." I didn't understand. I loved her, and I wanted to help. Why did I have to go? But Mary just said again, softly, "You have to leave. It's dangerous here." I told her I'd go to the next town to get petrol and then come back. She didn't say anything. "I love you, Mary," I said. "I'll come back to you. You can't stop me." She said goodbye to me at the door, looking very sad, and I felt sad too. I didn't want to leave. It was midnight, and the night was very dark, but I kept walking. I was really tired when I finally saw the lights of a town. I found some petrol and asked about the name of the village. The man at the petrol station gave me a strange look. "What village?" he asked. I told him about the old village, the houses, and the people in strange clothes. He looked at me oddly and thought for a moment before saying, "There was a village there, but it's not there anymore." He paused and then continued, "There are some strange stories about that place." "What kind of stories?" I asked. He didn't want to say at first, but then told me, "There was a big fire in the village. Everyone died. There are no people or houses there anymore." "How did it happen?" I asked. "And why?" He replied, "Oliver Cromwell's army killed them because they helped the king during the war." I was shocked. That war happened 350 years ago. I remembered the strange clothes, the long hair, the fire for cooking, and the horses. It didn't make sense. "But I saw the village," I cried. "I talked to people there." The man looked at me carefully and said, "There's a story about that village. Every 10 years, for just one day, it appears again. Then it disappears for another 10 years. If you're there, you have to leave before morning or you'll never leave." Could this be true? I thought about what Mary had said. You have to go. She loved me, but she was afraid for me. Now it all made sense. I went back to where the village had been, but it was gone. I searched everywhere, but I only found flowers and trees. The village was no longer there. All I could hear were the birds and the wind. I felt very sad. I sat on the ground and cried. I will never forget that day. I remember Mary, and I will always love her. Now I just have to wait 2 more months. The village will return again. On the right day, I'll go back. I will find her, my love with the long black hair, and this time I won't leave before morning. I'll stay with her. Chapter 5. The Doll. Mr. Brown lived near the center of town, but his small house had a garden. He loved his garden, which had many beautiful flowers in the summer, red, blue, and yellow. Mr. Brown enjoyed sitting there in the evenings and on weekends, but he had to work too. Mr. Brown worked in an office. It wasn't close to his house, so he often took the bus to and from work. Mr. Brown was a lonely man. He didn't have many friends and didn't talk to many people. Because of this, he often felt sad and bored. One very hot day, Mr. Brown decided to walk home instead of taking the bus. He wanted to enjoy the warm sun. On his walk, he passed a small shop. Mr. Brown looked in the window and saw some old things. He liked old things, so he went inside. "Good afternoon," said the man in the shop. "Good afternoon," said Mr. Brown. "May I look around?" "Please do," the man replied. Mr. Brown looked at the items in the shop and saw an old doll with a sad face. It wasn't a pretty doll, but Mr. Brown liked it. The doll looked like a little old man with white hair and black clothes. Mr. Brown thought, maybe this doll is lonely too. He asked the shopkeeper, "How much do you want for this old doll?" The man thought for a moment and said, "Oh, that? £3. Mr. Brown wanted the doll, but he wasn't sure why. £3 was a lot for an old doll, but he paid for it and left the shop with the doll in his hand. As he looked at the doll's face, he wondered, is it smiling? Then he thought, no, it's just a doll. He said to the doll, "I'm going to take you home." The doll didn't answer, of course. It was just a doll. So why did Mr. Brown talk to it? Because he was lonely. He put the doll in his case along with his office papers. Feeling tired, Mr. Brown got on the bus. When the conductor came to collect his fare, Mr. Brown bought a ticket. Suddenly, someone on the bus said, "Go away! You stupid man! Go away!" Everyone on the bus stared at Mr. Brown, wondering if he was the one who had said it. The conductor was upset, thinking Mr. Brown had spoken rudely to him. He gave Mr. Brown his ticket and walked away, not liking him much. When Mr. Brown got home, he was very tired. Who spoke on the bus, he wondered. He didn't know. He took the doll out of his case and looked at it. It was still just a doll. It wasn't very attractive. It was actually quite ugly, but it seemed to have a smile on its face. That's strange, thought Mr. Brown. He put the doll on the table and had his dinner, though he wasn't very hungry and only ate some bread and butter. Afterwards, he went to bed. He slept and forgot all about the doll, which was still on the table. Morning came and sunlight filled the room. When Mr. Brown opened his eyes, he noticed something on his bed. What is that? He wondered. He looked closer and saw the doll. But I left it on the table. It can't walk, it's just a doll. Mr. Brown was confused. It felt strange. He went to check the mail. Are there any letters for me? He wondered. There were 3 addressed to him, but to his surprise, they were already opened. Who opened them? Mr. Brown didn't know. After breakfast, he went to the bus stop and waited. When the bus arrived, he got on and sat down with his case. The bus was crowded, and an elderly woman had no place to sit. Mr. Brown, being kind, stood up and offered her his seat. Suddenly, someone said, "You stupid old thing!" The woman turned angrily and stared at Mr. Brown. His face turned red with embarrassment. Then he remembered the doll. He quickly got off the bus, still puzzled. The doll is at home, or is it? He thought. Curious, he opened his case and found the doll inside, smiling its strange smile. He placed the doll on the street and left it there, thinking, that's the end of that. He felt relieved and went to work, where he had a productive day. After work, Mr. Brown walked to the bus stop. But there, waiting for him, was the doll again. He saw its white hair, black clothes, and that unsettling smile. What's happening? He wondered. It's waiting for me. It's not just a doll. Panicked, he ran away from the bus stop and walked the 3 kilometers home, feeling exhausted. At home, he sat in a chair and fell asleep. After an hour, a loud crash from another room woke him up. What's wrong? He wondered as he went to investigate. There, sitting on the table, was the doll again. His cups and plates were shattered on the floor. This isn't just a doll, Mr. Brown realized. It's not friendly. He took the doll into the garden and buried it in the ground. This time, it's really the end of you, Mr. Brown said. You're under the ground now, and you won't get out. The next day, Mr. Brown took the bus to work. Without the doll, no one spoke rudely, and he had a good day. That evening, he came home, watched television, and felt peaceful. At 11 o'clock, he went to bed in his quiet, dark house. But an hour later, a noise startled him awake. What was that? He wondered, feeling cold and afraid. The sound was coming from the back door. Though frightened, Mr. Brown opened the door, and there it was, the doll again, covered in dirt from the ground. It looked at him and smiled a cold, eerie smile. Mr. Brown was terrified. Go away, he shouted. Please go away. The doll didn't speak, but it smiled again. Furious, Mr. Brown took the doll outside and built a large fire. He threw the doll onto the flames. Now you'll die, Mr. Brown said. This time, it's really the end. He watched as the fire grew hotter and bigger. Suddenly, there was a loud cry, and people rushed out of their homes. What's happening? They shouted. There's a big fire in Mr. Brown's garden, someone said. The people searched the house and garden, but Mr. Brown was nowhere to be found. All they saw near the fire was a doll with white hair, black clothes, and a smile on its face. Mr. Brown has disappeared. Ready to improve your English through exciting and mysterious stories? Join us as we explore strange encounters, brave moments, and twists of fate. Subscribe now and enhance your language skills while enjoying these captivating tales. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and start your journey to better English today.